the underwater car.
Ah,
So
yes,
take us
the
through
mud
this. A
crab.
couple of years ago, you guys had a crazy idea.
Favorite
Yeah.
topic. Yeah. So actually, for those that don't know, we drove a Land Cruiser across Darwin Harbour. And this stems way back. So the company I have now, when I said I worked for Territory Diving Services, which then become Neptune. So Territory Diving Services was started by a fellow called Tim Proctor back in before I was born, so late 70s. And he, great guy, he come up with an idea back then to drive a Land Cruiser across Darwin Harbour. And they tried it in 82. So they got an old sort of, that one's an FJ, but they got a diesel engine Land Cruiser, 42 series Land Cruiser, short wheelbase. Marinized it as much as they could with the technology they had back then, had a compressor on some floats, and basically sent it from Mandorah and tried to drive it across the harbour. Obviously didn't go great. I don't think they thought they were going to succeed. I think they were quite surprised how far the car got.
How far did they get in the end?
It's a credit to Land Cruiser. So basically they've gone off the beach, and they're on scuba and that, and they got no way of steering or nowhere where they're going. So this car sort of just drove itself about 4 kilometers, I think, before it hit a reef and stalled.
Yep.
And the reason they couldn't go any further is because they didn't have a pneumatic starter motor.
Okay.
So once it stalled, they had no way of restarting the engine. So that was it.
Yep.
And as I said, I don't think they were planning on succeeding because they already had a lift bag on the back of the car. All they needed to do was crack a valve and it'd inflate, and this thing would float to the surface, which they did, and they towed it across.
Yeah.
But I mean, great effort and great Territory spirit to try and do something like that.
Absolutely.
It's good to see the old footage of that because you see them, they're all in their, their stubby shorts.
Yeah,
no one's wearing a shirt.
Big beards.
Everyone's walking around with them old Darwin stubbies on Minute Beach.
Terry toweling hats and all that good stuff.
But anyway, so Tim's obviously a long time Territorian, and then he obviously had sons. So he's had a couple sons. One of them, Tommy Proctor, went to Darwin High School, and there was a crowd of guys, his mates, sort of got into diving in that stage. So I think before the podcast, I met Stevie Phil, Jerry Burton. There was also another guy, Tom Lawrence, who didn't get into diving. He got into filmmaking. So Tommy Lawrence was really the ideas man behind this. So he decided, we're gonna do what your dad tried to do, Tommy. We're gonna build a Land Cruiser and drive it across Darwin Harbour and make a TV series out of it. There's another guy, Glenn Summers, who's in that photo on the far left. So he's the electrical engineer genius behind the actual build.
So I was going to say, why electric? Like you've gone from the diesel in the 80s to then the electric. Is it because Glenn had the
I reckon
it
was a lot to do having Glenn as the resource there. So he's in that same Darwin High crowd, same school. He doesn't live in Darwin anymore, I don't think. He lives in Melbourne.
Yep.
But Tommy actually rang Glenn, and I think you know Glenn, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, so he's an interesting character. And Tommy probably hadn't spoken to him for a year, and he rang him up and said, "Listen, Tom, this is what we're gonna. Glenn, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna build a Land Cruiser, and we want to make it electric." And Glenn actually got really upset on the phone. So he's going, "You're crazy. This is an idea. You don't even know what you're doing. You have no idea what you're doing. You don't know how hard this is gonna be." And he hung up on Tom. And Tom tells me the story, and I'm probably butchering it a bit. But it just sounds funny, and it's Glenn to a T. And then Glenn, sure enough, he's processed what Tom's told him.
Yep.
Rang 10 minutes back later, and it's like, okay, let's do it. And then I didn't know Tommy Lawrence at that stage, but he gave me a call, and I didn't know him. I just got this random, call, and he said, "Matty, I hear you're the man that knows about diving and Darwin." I said, "Well, know a thing or two." And he goes, "I wanted to do what Tim Proctor did back in the 80s," and I just, let's do it.
Yeah.
So it was the greatest 3 months of my life. So we for the Land Cruiser itself, we had Glenn as the head electrical engineer, Finn Davey, who's a diver as well, part of that same group, who's a mechatronics engineer, and a team of really technical guys that built this thing. So they got I think it's called a net gain Hyper 9 electric motor and control system, which they bought offline. So that's an 88 kilowatt electric motor.
What's that? You just get it off Amazon, do you?
Yeah, you can buy them online.
Really?
Right? Pretty common in electric cars.
Sounded like something from space, but just from Amazon. Like you can just
I don't know if it's Amazon.
Online.
You can definitely buy it online.
Wow. Yeah.
So they adapted the bell housing on the cruiser, kept the same gearbox, and put this motor on it with the control system, and in the back we had 2 banks of batteries, which were 100 amp hour batteries. I think in total in the 2 banks we had 15 kilowatt hours of power.
Okay.
So heaps of power. And then what that was all encapsulated in aluminium framing with a clear perspex on top of the batteries. So it was all sealed, and then that whole drive unit was then filled with silicon oil.
Yep.
So it's a non-conductive oil.
Right.
Still quite nerve-wracking because anyone that knows anything about lithium batteries and salt water and
don't go well together
and exploding. So I didn't know much at the start when we started building this thing in my workshop, but I did a bit of research and I got very nervous. I thought, oh God, we're going to drive a bomb across Darwin Harbour, go across gas lines and things.
So what was your actual specific role in this? Were you driving the car? Were you just like providing diving intel and that sort of thing?
So I basically project managing the diving side of things.
Okay.
So I put the call out to pretty much every diver I know in Australia. And we managed to get 40 guys to volunteer their time and fly themselves to Darwin on their own expense.
Wow.
To join this crew. We had an army of people. We had like 60 odd people.
Is that right?
There for the project. I used one of my boats as the dive vessel. We did it all on surface supply. So we had full comms. We had a navigation system that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent all this money on getting this navigation system where we was meant to be able to track the GPS position and guide the guys across. Didn't work on the day, unfortunately. So we ended up doing it all by compass.
Wow.
Went a little bit off course.
Old school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was meant to take 4 hours. So I did the calcs. I think, we can do about 0.4 of a knot, which is probably 7 or 8 kilometers an hour. Sort of slow walking pace. I said, if we do that, we launch at Mandorah, we'll be at Mindle within 4 or 5 hours. Ended up taking 13.
So what was the biggest drawback?
We just kept getting bogged. So straight off the beach, all sand, beautiful. As soon as you get about 100, 200 meters off Mandorah Beach, it just goes into soft mud, and this thing just sunk in the mud. It was too heavy.
Yep.
We had the tires filled with water, but we had them at 40 psi, which was probably way too high.
Right.
So as soon as we got bogged the first time, I added lift bags to each corner. So we had 4 airbags on it to make it lighter. So I think we did the calcs on it. The in-water weight was about 550 kilos, which was still way too heavy. It should have been, down sort of 150 if we could have added some buoyancy first.
Yeah.
But that was the drama we had. So we got bogged there. And to get it out of the bog, I'd bring the boat over to the top and we'd rig it up with slings and just use chain force to lift it up out of the mud.
Okay.
And then get it back on some hard ground. So where we had the issues, we come off the beach, hit the soft patch of mud, and we battled all the way to the gas lines. Impex and Santos wouldn't let us drive over the gas lines. So we had a lot of to and fro with them. And then in the end, we had to pick it up and take it over that anyway.
Right.
So we got to there, we picked it up, put it back down on the other side of the gas lines, and then it was actually really hard bottom all the way to the sandbar at Cullen Bay. So all that deep in the middle of the channel went really quick. Amazing diving, great for the guys that got them dives. The poor fellas that did the getting out of the bog wasn't much fun.
Yeah.
We had a hard time coming up the sandbank on the other side because it was steep. But this is a sandbar in front of Cullen Bay I'm talking about. We'd have that big party every year.
Yep.
So we got over that, and you're thinking sandbar here, Mindle Beach here, it should be sand all the way in between. No, it was just soft mud.
Right.
So we got bogged a lot through there as well. So, but we battled through, and we got there eventually at 9 o'clock at night. I think we ended up coming out of the water.
Yeah.
Which was an amazing thing because people had been there since lunchtime expecting us to arrive around lunch. There was a bar set up on Mindle Beach, so it got a bit of a party atmosphere. Coming out of the water, I remember when we drove it up, I actually jumped on the car when we drove it up. There's a photo of us there. There was 4,000 people at low tide have walked out on Mindle Beach with their phone lights, and all these phone lights along the beach were just next level. So as we drove up, they sort of just parted around us and followed us up the beach. It was a spine-tingling experience.
Yeah.
So one of the guys is sitting there in the front left. He was the one that funded it all. Taylor Smith, legend of a guy. We did it on a shoestring budget, but if it wasn't for him, none of that would have happened either. So, and then we had Luke Purdy on the right there, who was our celebrity we brought in for the TV series, or Tommy brought in.
Yeah,
extreme sort of guy. Working with him for 3 months was probably just as hard as building a Land Cruiser. But he was a great guy and great fun to be around. That's for sure.
So was there a record broken or anything like that? Is that what you
Yeah,
were
yeah.
attempting?
Yeah. So it was for the TV series that Tommy made, Colt Cars. If anyone hasn't seen it, definitely give it a plug. But yeah, no, we broke the record for the longest underwater drive, the deepest underwater drive. I don't think they're official records in the Guineas because we didn't pay the 40 odd grand to get the Guineas guys here to witness it.
Got to fly them in and put them up in a hotel
it's
and
an
stuff.
expensive thing, and
Yeah.
but we got the unofficial record for sure. Yeah,
Great. So is there any appetite to do it again and try and like beat the 13 hours or anything?
Well, maybe not that exact project again, but I reckon there's definitely something on the boil.
Yeah.
In that extreme space, because as I said, I don't think there's anywhere in Australia where you kind of get away with this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
not that we did anything wrong and everything was we didn't hurt any environment other than sort of driving over a little bit of coral here and there. But
I was going to say, was there
nothing worse than anchors would do, on a daily basis.
Was there any criticism or anything you guys copped, or like what was the public perception of it?
I found it really
positive.
Good. Yeah. As I said, like the amount of people that rocked up on Mendel to see us achieve the goal and the after party afterwards, I didn't get any negative feedback. I don't really go on social media, so I don't know what the feedback was online. I'm sure there's probably some trolls on there, but that's just the nature of the beast for social media.
Looking back, was there any lessons you took out of the underwater car
make it
expedition?
Lighter. If we're going to do something like that again and drop the pressure in the tires. But the build itself worked amazingly. So one of the things I was very scared about, even though we've filled the whole drive system with silicon oil, there's always going to be a little bit of air trapped in there. And as you go to depths, I think we got to 35 meters. So that airspace is going to be constricted 3.5 times.
Right.
And that's when the water gets sucked in. So I think it was Finn Davies' idea. He came up with an ingenious way of building this bladder under the seat that had silicon oil on it. And we just grabbed a couple like 20 kilo plates from the gym, just whacked it on top. So as we went down, it's got pressure on it, and any air the compressor would push this oil in. So like an oil compensation device, like a homemade one.
Right.
I remember I actually borrowed an oil, like a proper, $20,000 oil compensator off a mate of mine that runs ROVs. But the pressures that runs at was nowhere near, like it was way too high for what we were going to be doing. We were basically just keeping this whole system just above ambient. So maybe less than 10 PSI or something of pressure in there. Because I was very worried about getting water ingress into that system and then batteries getting into a thermal
runaway, whatever.
And then a big bomb going off underwater.
Yeah. So is there anything you took from the underwater car that you could then apply to your commercial diving? Because how you said Finn had a good idea to do that plates and the oil thing. A lot of the innovation in society, has come from, say, like the space program, like trying to get rockets up into space. And then a lot of those little gadgets were then, commercialized and used in domestic life back in, America and then the rest of the world. Did you find any sort of similarities there? Or
not really, but it did open my eyes up to know that you can take like that electric motor that's designed for, not really for electric cars, but you can take something like that and you can adapt it to our industry,
right?
With a little bit of innovation. So there's a lot of off-the-shelf items you can purchase, and I mean we can make an FJ Cruiser, rip the petrol engine out of it, and turn it into an electric.
Yeah.
And after spending 13 hours driving this thing across the harbour, we drove it out the beach. We only used like 15% of our battery power. So
that was never going to be a problem. You always had enough juice.
We were worried.
Yeah.
The guys did the calcs and they were comfortable, but we didn't expect to use like that little of our power.
Yeah.
So then after that, I had it in my workship for months after that, and I had to basically drive it around, around Fisherman's Wharf and just to drop the batteries down because it was a danger having charged batteries in there. So my instructions were to run this thing down, Yeah. And that car just kept going and going and going. It was working perfectly, other than the rust that was starting to appear. I've got a 20-foot container at my workshop where we've converted it into a dive tank to do our welder coils and that. So we picked it up and dunked it in that after the crossing, give it a freshwater rinse. It didn't really work. It still corroded quite heavily after the crossing.
Yeah.
But that car was running fine by the time it left Darwin.
I guess that's just how far battery tech's come, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how you can convert an old cruiser like that to electric. And geez, it drove well. like, and the torque and the power, like, yeah. If you ever make a bull catcher or a hunting cruiser, turn it into electric. It was awesome.
There you go.
Yeah.
As an experienced diver, what sort of advice would you have for, say, the next generation of avid divers that want to get into the industry? Do you have any advice for them, or what's the best way to get involved?
Best way to get involved is obviously, you have to have a love of diving and the industry. You got to be committed to pay that initial outlay to do your qualifications. Once you've got your qualifications, it opens up a whole world of opportunity. The divers, it's a funny game. No one really takes full time jobs. They just work casually. They jump from project to project, but you can take it all around the world, all around Australia. The qualifications we have in Australia are the highest level. So you have what's called an ADAS ticket. You rock up in the US and you say you've got an ADAS ticket. You got more work than you can do, and it's really high paying. Like guys that finish their ticket straight out of school, they're on $600 a day as a green diver sort of thing.
Yep.
So
Pretty
yeah,
enticing.
good industry to get
Yep.
into. A lot of people that do their ticket don't end up making a career out of it, but
Do
it's
they
good.
branch out into other things, or is it
Well, some people, it's just not for everybody. It's
right?
not as glamorous as it sounds. A lot of time you're in the mud, no
Mm.
viz. Commercial diving, you wear the big helmets and you got all the tools hanging off you. It's not like your normal recreational dive. It can be quite daunting. Can be quite physical as well.
Yep.
But in saying that, I mean, in the North Sea, the saturation divers up there, the average age would be over 55. So they sort of get their job over there, and they never leave.
As for Ocean Tech, how can people, potential clients, how can they find you and get your services?
Oh, we're easy to find, obviously online. Just go straight to the website. We're pretty well known, so we've got a really good clientele base. To be honest, we can't take on too much extra work at the moment. We're pretty much at capacity.
You might have to expand by the sound.
Yeah. We have been rapidly. So since
Yeah.
starting Ocean Tech, we started this is 2.5 years ago. We started with 4 employees, and a small revenue base. We've gone 10x in 2.5 years. So that's employees and amount of work we're doing. So I've got a really good crew. Some very experienced guys and girls. I've got one young lady now who's a first commercial diver in Darwin, local girl.
Right.
But she's also really good at managing. So
Yep.
Brianna Riley, she's great, and a lot of our success due to sort of her helping the management side of things. And my most experienced dive supervisor has been diving up here for 40 years, Alistair Lehman. Amazing guy, most technical minded for diving equipment that I've ever met. Probably forgot more about diving than I'll ever learn. So it's easy when you've got a good crew around you, for sure.
Mate, sounds like a fascinating industry, and sounds like you're getting good growth in anyone's terms. So, mate, we appreciate you taking the time today to come and have a chat with us. And
No
best of luck.
dramas, it was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, mate.
All right, too easy.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.